Good evening. Welcome to the League of Women Voters of Los Alamos Candidate Forum for this coming November 2022 election. This evening, we will be hearing from, I should say my name first. I'm Ellen Mills. I'll be the moderator for this forum. And I'd also like to introduce Bob Williams and Akana Peck, who are our behind the scenes technical support this evening. We have Lynn Jones, a member of the League board, who will be asking the questions. And we have Luke Favorite, who is a student at Los Alamos High School, who is our timer for this evening. We'll be hearing from our judge candidates, our sheriff candidates, county assessor, and our, did I say sheriffs? And probate judge as well. And our state representative, Christine Chandler. The audience can ask questions by typing them into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And then Lynn Jones will be the individual who will read and ask those questions. They're not necessarily in order. So if you think you've typed it in and you're not being heard, we get a lot of questions and we'll do the best we can to cover as much territory as we can this evening. We also, let me look at my script here. We have a message from Victoria Martinez, who is a member of the staff at the county clerk's office. So I'm going to turn it over to Victoria now to give us some very important information on the upcoming voting process. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you, Ellen. As Ellen said, my name is Victoria Martinez. I am the elections manager for the county clerk's office. And I just wanted to give you all some information on early voting. Los Alamos County voters may vote in person at an early voting location prior to election day at the following locations: council chambers starting Tuesday, October 11th through Friday, October 14th. And then Monday, October 17th through Friday, October 21st. The voting hours are from 8 to 5. Starting October 22nd, early voting will start in White Rock and at council chambers on Saturdays. So you can vote Saturday, October 22nd, and then Monday, October 24th through Saturday, October 28th. And then Monday, October 31st through Saturday, November 5th. The voting hours are 8 to 6. Early voting is closed at both locations on Sundays and on Monday, November 7th. We have election day polling places. We call them vote centers. Election day is Tuesday, November 8th. Polls open at 7 a.m. and they're open until 7 p.m. We have the Los Alamos County Municipal building at 1000 Central Avenue, the Los Alamos Golf Course at 4250 Diamond Drive in the multipurpose room, the White Rock Town Hall at 139 Longview Drive in the training rooms, the Betty E. Hart Senior Center at 1101 Bathtub Row in the downstairs classroom, and the University of New Mexico, LA at 4000 University Drive in Building 6, Room 631. And these are your election day vote centers. You can request an absentee ballot. You have to request an absentee ballot with each election. Absentee voting begins on October 11th, and we will start mailing out ballots on October 11th. You can request an absentee ballot by filling out an application and returning it to our office no later than Thursday, November 3rd. So I do need to warn, this date does make it difficult to mail out a ballot and get it back to us by election day. So the sooner you request an absentee ballot, the sooner we can mail out the ballot. And you're ensured to receive it by election day. You can complete an application online by visiting the Secretary of State's voter information portal. It's www.nmvote.org. You can obtain an application from our office, or you can download an application online, fill it out, and mail it in to us. We do have the options to request an accessible absentee ballot. So it has expanded to become more accessible. Absentee ballots have been designed so that a voter who is blind or visually impaired may independently use their non-visual or low vision technology to mark their ballot. So you can fill out an application online by visiting the New Mexico Secretary of State voter information portal. You do need to provide an email address so that way the ballot can be sent to you electronically. You have to read and complete the certification documentation to provide the electronic absentee ballot. Ballot will be mailed to voters who have properly filled out the application, and an official return envelope will also be mailed out. To return an absentee ballots may be returned via the following methods: sent through United States Postal Service, hand delivered to our office, hand delivered to an election poll worker at any early voting or election day site, dropped off at any one of the 2 drive-through ballot drop areas located at Mesa Public Library or the White Rock Library. Lots of folks ask who can deliver an absentee ballot. Per state statute, a member of your immediate family or your caregiver may hand deliver your absentee ballot, provided that the voter has subscribed the official mailing envelope of the absentee ballot. An unrelated third party may not deliver another voter's absentee ballot. Absentee ballots must be physically returned no later than 7 p.m. on Tuesday, November 8th, Election Day, to Los Alamos County Clerk. Postmarks do not count. If you have any questions, you can contact us. 505-819. Actually, that's my personal number. 505-662-8010. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Are we seeing any questions at all? I'm asking.
No, I don't see any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Victoria, for all that very important information as we approach Election Day. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the candidates we have this evening are Christine Chandler, running for State Representative, District 43. We also have for Magistrate Judge this evening, Catherine Taylor and Tim Bullock. Our sheriff candidates are Jason Wardlow-Herrera and Chris Luchini. Our county assessor is George Chandler. Laura Burrows, who unfortunately could not be here this evening, but when we get to the assessor part, we do have a statement we'll read for the audience. Our probate judge, Michael Redondo, and municipal judge, Elizabeth Allen. Those are our candidates for this evening. And each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes to make an opening statement. Then we have a series of questions we'll be asking, some coming from the audience. And then when we finish, each candidate who has an opponent will have the opportunity for a 1-minute closing statement. I should also say that candidates have 1.5 minutes to be able to answer the questions. We have our timer, Luke Favorite, here this evening, and he's going to be watching the clock for us so that the time limits are followed. And I'd like to get started right now by introducing Christine Chandler, State Representative, District 43.
Hello, I'm trying to turn my video on, and okay, now I can turn my video on. All right, shall I start? Is the timer starting?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Well, first, I want to thank the League for hosting this forum. And also, I want to say what an honor it is and a pleasure to serve all of you. I feel very lucky to know so many engaged and thoughtful constituents and to serve in a legislature where my colleagues work collaboratively with each other and our governor. While we do have our disagreements, our productivity has been extraordinary, particularly when compared with the previous 10 years where gridlock was the norm, where education, healthcare, behavioral health, and infrastructure needs were at best ignored and at worst actively dismantled. While many good things have been happening in New Mexico, and while I am very optimistic about our future, that optimism is tempered by the continuing pressure from the political figures, pundits, and activists, both here and nationally, that espouse the big lies that our elections are corrupt, that the attack on our Capitol and law enforcement was a media exaggeration, that school curricula are brainwashing our children. Many now believe book banning is acceptable, and our rights to privacy and bodily autonomy are being routinely challenged. Maybe you wonder why I focus on these national issues in a local race. Well, that's the crux. These are not only national issues. We have state and local candidates who hold these views, and some boldly and some who in a strongly blue state seek to play down their convictions. We live in a state where many sheriffs and other officials feel emboldened to declare which laws they will enforce and which they won't. These efforts at the local level are extensions of organized national movements. We should all be concerned that behavior that was once considered abhorrent is now becoming normalized. So what do we do about this dangerous trend? First, it is important for us to know our candidates and reject those who either refuse to answer questions or obfuscate. Be leery of those who say their views on the presidential election or the insurrection are irrelevant to running for local office. Of course, they're fair questions. They reveal the person's respect for law and for decency and their proclivity to latch on to conspiracy theories. Ask direct questions about their views. Are our elections fair and secure? Ask them their views on facilitating access to voting. Do they support ballot drop boxes and mail-in ballots? Do they support access to abortion care? Now, more than ever, is the time to be an active and engaged voter. Thank you.
Let's go ahead and start in on some questions for Representative.
Okay, question number 1. What are the greatest opportunities for high impact spending in the upcoming legislative session?
Gosh, well, first, I think we need to look to invest in funds that can support us when these high volume, revenues that we are experiencing taper off. So many of us have been talking about investing in the early childhood fund to support activities, perhaps creating a fund for behavioral health so that we can support behavioral health activities as we move forward. I think we also need to be looking at putting additional monies in the severance tax permanent fund. We've been drawing on those funds, and if we invest more in the permanent fund, it will be a it will be a cushion for us when our revenues begin to taper off. And of course, we need to continue to invest in broadband and other infrastructure. I would point out, however, that we have about $100 million in the Connect New Mexico Fund, which I think is adequate for now to really help kickstart where we're going in terms of broadband expansion. But we need to not only invest in programs, but I do think we need to be looking at funds that will help us smooth out revenues when these oil and gas, surplus is in decline.
Okay, next question. If Constitutional Amendment 2 passes, how can the required implementing legislation safeguard public funds?
Well, the implementing legislation will establish the criteria for which those funds can be used. And if you will note that we attempted to draw the language on that amendment fairly tightly, so it's only the state that can create programs, and it would require any law that is based on that constitutional amendment to be passed, obviously, by a majority of the legislators. And we, as legislators, will have a responsibility to ensure that the appropriate checks are in place, just as checks are in place now when they're spending and funds are designated for certain kinds of activities. The check would also be the LFC, who does analyses on spending and provides a check and reports to the legislature to ensure that funds are spent properly and in accordance with their implementing legislation.
What legislation would you support to improve our elections?
Well, a whole litany of things. I think that we need to be as welcoming. How do I say that? I think we need to pass laws that encourage voting. So the things that I mentioned in my opening statement are examples of ways to increase access to ballots. So, for example, the drop boxes, which some question and have opposed, I strongly support and think they're very important in terms of providing access to voters. Convenience is very important, I think. Ways to improve access to absentee ballots, I would support. Things of that nature, I definitely would promote and advance in the legislature.
Do you have a comment on Constitutional Amendment 3? That's the judges.
I'm sorry, could you tell me what 3 is?
Yes, it's proposing to amend, etc. Appointed judge serve at least 1 year before a general election is held for the office to which the judge was appointed.
Yes, I think I support that provision. It gives it's really hard on a judge to be appointed for 3 months and then have to run for election. So I think it's reasonable to give them a year in office to kind of get themselves established and then face an election. It also gives them a record for the voters to have a better understanding of how that judge comports him or herself, conducts him or herself in trials and so on. So it's really, I think it's an advantage to both. One, the judge, and two, the public, who has the opportunity to have a way to assess what that judge has been doing in the last year.
Okay. Any plans to replace the jobs and tax income that are going away due to the closing of the San Juan coal plant?
Oh, well, the ETA, which we enacted, I think my first year in the legislature, had we funded job training programs, educational programs, a severance package, and a number of things along those lines. So the bill itself had a number of provisions intended to support those displaced workers who were affected by the closure of the plant. I also know that the Secretary of Labor, with whom I had lunch last week when we were talking about various programs, she and the Department of Labor have been actively going out to the area and meeting with workers to try to ensure that they're getting connected with training programs and all of those kinds of things that the legislature funded in the previous bill in 2019.
Okay. Would you be supportive of all mail-in ballots, such as Utah has?
Yes. I think mail-in voting is the most accessible way for voters to participate. And whatever we can do to expand access to voting and making it as accessible as possible is a very important goal. I think many of my colleagues share my view on this, and I would support all mail-in voting programs. We do it in Los Alamos. We have done it in Los Alamos for bonds and so on, and it has gone very well.
And that seems to be the end of the questions.
Okay, well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to visit with you all, and I look forward to hearing from the other candidates. Thank
you very much, Chris. Our next candidates are for Magistrate Judge. They are Catherine Taylor, and Tim Bullock. And we're going to start with Catherine. You'll have 3 minutes for your opening statement, then we'll move to Tim for his opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Catherine Taylor, and I'm running for Magistrate Judge. I've been an attorney for more than 20 years and spent my entire career in courtrooms in front of judges. As a deputy district attorney prosecuting felony and misdemeanor cases in both adult and juvenile courts, and as Deputy Trial Counsel for the California State Bar, prosecuting California licensed attorneys for ethics and code of conduct violations. Currently, I am the teen court coordinator for Los Alamos Municipal Court. For those of you who may not be familiar, Teen Court is primarily a diversion program for kids in our community who commit traffic offenses or low-level nonviolent crimes. The other part of my job as Teen Court Coordinator is to recruit and train teen volunteers to fill the roles of prosecutor, defense attorney, judge, and jury in our teen court hearings. It's been as Teen Court Coordinator that I've built invaluable relationships throughout our community, and I've seen firsthand every day the way Los Alamos prioritizes its values, especially when it comes to our kids. I've worked with school leaders, the police department, its officers and victim advocate, the juvenile probation officer at CYFD, the teen center, JJAB, the courts, all people dedicated and committed to supporting and building a healthy and safe community. As coordinator, I have taken the Teen Court program from a one-size-fits-all to a more individualized approach, not just imposing consequences, but also identifying the underlying issues behind a kid's actions and addressing those to eliminate recidivism, something a good judge does in every case. I am especially proud of our collaboration with JJAP to implement the Restorative Justice Program. Restorative justice requires teens to examine the choices that led them into trouble, the ramifications their actions had on others, and then guides them as they make amends to those affected, including themselves. As Vice President of the statewide Teen Court Association, I've cultivated a network of colleagues throughout our state committed to improving outcomes for youth in New Mexico. As a board member of the association, I work to facilitate regular trainings by experts on critical issues that impact all New Mexicans, most recently on harm reduction in the fentanyl epidemic. Staying informed on the problems facing so many of our kids, our families, our communities is essential to addressing many of the factors that bring people into the criminal justice system in the first place. I know how fortunate my family is to be part of a community that is caring and engaged in creating a safe place to grow up, go to school, work, raise a family, enjoy the outdoors, enjoy retirement at whatever stage of life one might be. I look forward to applying what I've learned working within our community, combined with my broad range of experience within the criminal justice system, to serving Los Alamos as your magistrate judge. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim.
First of all, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event, and thank you to everybody that is taking the time out to participate and view the event. I'm Tim Bullock. I'm running for Magistrate Judge. My wife, Linda, and I have been married for 38 years, and we are blessed by 2 adopted sons. The oldest is in his 4th year at a service academy. The other is in his 2nd year of engineering at university. Both are Eagle Scouts. We've lived in Los Alamos for 4.5 years and have enjoyed northern New Mexico for many years prior to actually moving here. I'm a Rotarian and the president-elect of the local Rotary Club of Los Alamos. I've been a Boy Scout leader for many years, and I currently serve as Eagle Advisor for Troop 22 in Los Alamos. I'm a student of U.S. history, an avid open ocean sailor, and I'm a long-suffering Broncos fan. I received my undergraduate education and law degree from the University of Denver. I hold a degree in business from the London School of Economics. Before I began practicing law, I worked as an aide in the British Parliament. I was a merchant banker in New York and London. I taught micro and macro economics as an adjunct professor. And while in law school, I ran for and was elected to the city council of a city about the size of Los Alamos. I've practiced law for several decades. I'm licensed in 3 states, but now actively practice in just New Mexico and Colorado. The thrust of my work is now in federal court, doing complex litigation. I've represented cases before the Colorado Supreme Court. I've made oral argument before the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. I've practiced law at every level of the justice system except the U.S. Supreme Court. If elected, I will be fair and impartial at all times. I will be compassionate and respectful to all who appear before the bench, and I pledge to hold repeat offenders accountable. I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you very much. So we'll take the first question with Catherine answering first for this round.
Okay. What made you decide to run for office?
I put a lot of thought into this decision. What drew me to run for office for magistrate judge was the logical next step. My family and I relocated to Los Alamos, and I began working as the teen court coordinator. And with Judge Casados retiring, I thought this was an opportunity for me to use my experience, 20 years as an attorney practicing in criminal courts and administrative courts, to give back and serve a larger and wider portion of our community. Right now, I work primarily with teens from middle school through high school. And as magistrate judge, I recognize that I would have a broader impact and be able to use my experience to benefit a wider part of our community.
Okay, Tim?
It's my chance to give back as well. I'm near the end of my legal career. I'm 64 years old. I figure I probably have about another 5 or 10 years left. And I'd like to change direction and give back to the community.
Okay, our next question, and Tim will be answering first.
Do you believe the qualifications for magistrate judge should be changed? Why or why not?
Well, right now, the qualifications for magistrate judge is simply a high school diploma, except in districts where there are more than 200,000 electors. In that event, the qualifications require that the person be a licensed attorney. I think it matters that the magistrate judge be a licensed attorney and have practiced in the jurisdiction in which they wish to serve. I'm the only candidate that meets that qualification in this race.
Can
Catherine?
you repeat the question for me, please?
Yes. Do you believe the qualifications for magistrate judge should be changed? Why or why not?
Personally, I do not. I think that having a legal background and a legal education is valuable. I think having years of practice can be valuable, but there's nothing magic about being a judge. I think it takes common sense. I think it takes somebody that cares about their community. I think it takes somebody that respects the rule of law, that is willing to follow our Constitution, both state and the national Constitution. I think that there are plenty of people who have not gone to college or gone to law school that possess all of those things. So do I think the requirements need to be changed? No, but I think ultimately that's up to our county and the voters.
Okay, thank you. Next question goes to Catherine first.
Describe your specific judicial experience.
Specifically, I have been the judge a lot of times in teen court. I have sat as the judge in mock trial competitions and also in training. I've coached a few mock trial teams. I think that having appeared before countless judges, I wouldn't even begin to guess at a number. The most important thing, as far as experience sitting up on the bench is one thing, but observing how different judges conduct their courtrooms, how they treat litigants, including the defendants, their families, the police officers, the attorneys, their staff. I think those are all very telling. And I think that I've been in a position to see a number of judges and how they comport themselves. And I think the one thing that I take away from that is judges who serve with humility and with patience, in my opinion, are the best judges and are the ones that are fit to serve.
Tim?
I've never been a judge, except in law school competitions, of which I've been a judge many times. I have, like my competition, been before many, many judges in many, many courts at all levels of the judicial system, with the exception of the Supreme Court. That's my answer.
Okay, and I think we have time for another question, Lynn.
Yeah, it looks like we have time for a couple, and since there's an interest, I'd like to have
Yes.
a couple more.
Let's do that. Well, the first question, or the next question gets directed to Tim first.
Okay. For magistrates, as a practicing attorney, what local cases have you been involved in?
Perhaps the most the case with the most notoriety is the Surfy case involving an overstepping of county government, in which my client brought a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the county of Los Alamos. That's in this state. In Colorado, I've just come off of litigation against General Motors, where I won my client a substantial award. Aside from that, I practice regularly bankruptcy law in Colorado and New Mexico, which is more of a paper pushing function other than the times that litigation is required.
Okay, Catherine.
The question again, please.
As a practicing attorney, what local cases have you been involved in?
So as I shared, I am the teen court coordinator for Los Alamos Municipal Court. That involves juvenile cases, and under state law, juvenile cases are confidential, so I cannot comment on those. Thank you.
All right, let's take another question and we'll start with Catherine.
Okay. How does being magistrate judge fit in with your current duties?
Maybe I don't understand my current duties as teen court coordinator, or
I think the implication is, how do you have time for magistrate judge in addition to your current duties?
well, magistrate judge is a full-time job, so there would be a conflict of interest for me to sit as magistrate judge, but also serve as teen court coordinator. So I don't see it being a factor of time. Just like any other full-time job, I expect that there'll be the regular business hours and then additional work and reading and preparation in the evenings.
Okay, Tim.
I would have to withdraw from my cases as a private attorney.
Okay, Lynn, do we have other questions? Because we do have time.
That's it. Go ahead.
Okay. So let's go to closing statements. Tim, I'm going to ask you to make your closing statement first.
Okay. We in Los Alamos have a safe community, and I want to keep it that way. Many in our community now believe that the courts are too soft on crime. I pledge to hold individuals who are found guilty of a crime accountable, particularly where repeat offenders, recidivists, are involved. The law is nuanced. Experience, knowledge, and training in real court matters. Having a legal mind is important. Practicing law every day for decades makes a difference in the quality of justice. I'm the only New Mexico licensed and actively practicing attorney in this race. I'll pledge to be available to law enforcement 24/7 to take their phone calls and to sign warrants. I pledge to be impartial and fair. I won't legislate from the bench. I pledge to apply the law to the facts to reach just decisions. How will I improve the magistrate court? I'll improve procedure, communications, and transparency by publishing dockets online, giving public notice of hearings, holding brown bag lunches for attorneys and other professionals. And I think I'm out of time.
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, though. Catherine.
Thank you first to the league and everyone who logged in tonight. I appreciate this opportunity to share with you my qualifications and experience as an attorney, practicing for over 20 years in the criminal and administrative courts, as well as my work here in our community. Taken together, my background makes me particularly qualified to serve as your magistrate judge. Thank you.
And thank you both candidates for participating this evening. Now we're moving to our candidates for sheriff, Jason Wardlow-Herrera, I hope I'm saying that correctly, and Chris Luchini. And Jason, are you there? Okay, great. Okay, so we're following the listings based on the ballot. So that means that Jason will be giving his opening statement first.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Wardlow-Herrera. I'm running for sheriff. Thank you to the league and everyone else for being here tonight. I just want to start off, I guess, the sheriff's role in Los Alamos. A lot of people don't know that it's a unique role. Unlike the rest of the sheriffs in the state of New Mexico, the sheriff is not the chief law enforcement officer of the county. It's actually the chief of police, which is Dino Scambalon. And the sheriff's role is simple and straightforward. It's to maintain the sex offender registry, and that's the only job that they have. The civil process actually got turned over to the Los Alamos Police Department, I believe, a couple years ago. But I'm excited. I just retired from the police department. I worked there for 16 years. I was the deputy chief of police there for 6 years. So I have a strong relationship with the police department and the current new deputy chief of police, Oliver Morris, Commander Preston Ballot, to be able to work in collaboration with LAPD to make sure that our citizens and most importantly, our children are safe from sex offenders, including updating the posters at schools and the database, along with house checks, to ultimately make sure that they're compliant with the state law and our county ordinances. So it's not really a lot of duties, but it's important to our community and to our citizens, again, especially our children. So I look forward to possibly becoming sheriff to help make a change moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Chris, opening statement?
Yeah. The administrative nature of the Los Alamos County Sheriff has been well established with both the plain text of the county charter and 2 different lawsuits that have at the lowest level established that it is not a law enforcement position, it is administrative. And as noted, it pretty much has the only function defined by the New Mexico Constitution as maintaining the sex offender registry. There are 7 registered sex offenders in this county. That's a fairly typical number, tends to oscillate up and down by a couple. There are, I believe, 3 additional that are registered due to working at the laboratory. They don't live here, but they pass through the county. It's a fairly small number of people to keep track of. The posting of the information about these people in the various locations on the web, et cetera, is a fairly straightforward task. There really isn't any innovation to be had with respect to this duty. It's been, I believe, more or less adequately executed previously. The one difference that I would like to see, and this is, or at least I would like to see this explored, we don't have any elected law enforcement in this county. I think that if I could wave a magic wand, which I can't, I would like to convince the county council to put a referendum on the ballot for 2 years from now to transition our county from having a police department and a figurehead sheriff's department to having an elected sheriff's department that essentially converts the existing police department over to a sheriff's department. That would, by the way this works, that would have to be done in 4 years, which would also be the end of the term of office for this current sheriff's position. I have explored this a little bit. There are some issues with respect to pensions and some technical issues with respect to state law and the para system. But there's some interest in having an elected chief law enforcement officer that is not just beholden to the county council. There are mechanisms, and this is something that does come up. There are many mechanisms to remove an elected sheriff, and this has been done repeatedly here in New Mexico. So it's not a situation where you're electing somebody who gets to stay in office regardless of the malfeasance. That's it.
Okay, thank you. We'll start our questions now. The first one starts with Jason. So Lynn?
Mhm. What made you decide to run for office?
Well, I guess, I just retired. Like I said, I've been up here 16 years, and I was thinking about being done with law enforcement. But the fact that the sheriff's role here is simple in the case of duties and responsibilities, I thought I could still make a difference in my community. I've always helped out. I've always volunteered. I've been coaching up here, YMCA. Now I'm currently now the middle school, one of the middle school football coaches. I love our community. I enjoy the children and coaching and giving back. So I figured this could be one responsibility, one job I could do part-time, but also be committed and passionate to be able to make a difference still within our community that I live in.
Okay, Chris.
I got interested in the sheriff's position about 6 years ago when there was a lot of controversy about the then sheriff and his attempts to expand the role of that office. I think the plain language of the law, and obviously the courts agreed that that was not his interpretation of what the duties were, wasn't supported by either the courts or the county charter. I do think that this is essentially a figurehead office. It's a roughly $10,000 a year position, which is an awful lot to pay for maintaining the sex offender registry. I understand the history of why it is the way it is. I also understand that there have been multiple referenda to remove the sheriff's office. There is no requirement under state law for a county to have a sheriff. But yet we do have this vestigial office. Simplifying that, having a single law enforcement entity for the county, since there's no separation between the county and it's a unified city county, right? There doesn't make sense to have two sets of law enforcement here. So that's my main interest. Obviously, if the county council and the voters don't want to do that, then it maintains the office as it is and maintains the sex offender registry, and that's it.
Okay, our next question with Chris answering first.
What would be the advantage to Los Alamos to turn the police department into a department under the sheriff's lead?
Simplification. It's a current sheriff's office has, again, very minimal duties. Taking the police department and turning the sheriff's office into a sheriff's department essentially increases people's confidence that law enforcement is responsive to the people and not simply to the county council. I don't see this as a huge issue. I think it does help at the margins. Honestly, and I'll answer the next question right now, if there's a referendum in 2 years and the voters don't want to make this transition, I would support a referendum to remove the sheriff as a county officer. It's just, we spent a lot of money for this. The para system, no offense to my opponent here, but if he's got 16 years in and he gets another 4 years, I believe he gets fully vested in the retirement system. It's a lot of expense and it doesn't really do much. I mean, again, sex offender registry is required under the Constitution, but I imagine there, an arrangement can be made to make it someone to take up that duty. That's it.
Okay, Jason, your response.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. What would be the advantage to Los Alamos to turn the police department into a department under the sheriff's lead?
I see my opponent's perspective on that, but right now I don't see an issue with how it's being run. I believe under state statute, each county has to have a sheriff, a county sheriff. So that's the reason why they have the one responsibility. I mean, to incorporate the police department to make the chief to go through election and be the sheriff and change everything from police officers to deputies, but also why I try to fix it. It doesn't seem an issue right now, and it seems it's more simplified. The sheriff says role, and the county police department, the chief police handles all the other duties. Again, I don't have to be my true, honest opinion, but I do believe under state statute, the sheriff is responsible. You do have to have elected sheriff in each county. And just to clarify, para, I'm already receiving retirement for my 20 years law enforcement. I started in Taos County. I was a deputy sheriff there for 4 years, so I understand sheriff's departments for working there. However, if I am elected in January, I'll have to submit a letter to Para suspending my a suspension of retirement per se. So I'm not going to pay into Para. I'm not going to receive anything from the county from Para. It's just going to be my retirement check from the police department. Just wanted to clarify.
Okay, thank you. And just so you know, you were, part of that was a little bit garbled, but I do think we got the gist of your message there, or I would have interrupted. Can you
I'm
hear?
sorry, my AirPods sometimes, so that's probably what it was. I apologize.
Okay, all right, Joe. So just a heads up. So our next question with Jason answering first.
Yes, I think this has already been answered, but I'll ask the question. What are your qualifications for sheriff?
I have 19 years of law enforcement experience, including the FBI National Academy. I went in 2015 to Quantico, 2.5 months there. I've been in numerous trainings. I work for a sheriff's department, which insight on a lot of different aspects of the difference between sheriff's departments and the police department. So I think also knowing a lot of the individuals, you need to have that strong work collaboration with the police department, because the sheriff is just administrative sheriff. It's important to be able to work with them, to be able to have assistance with doing house checks and any law enforcement duties.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, as previously noted, law enforcement experience here is probably not particularly relevant. This isn't a law enforcement position. It's an administrative position. I run small businesses. I manage staff, whatever staff the sheriff's department would have, which I imagine is between 0 and maybe half a FTE, would be pretty minimal. This is about executing the very limited duties and nothing more. If there is any requirement for assistance from the police department on house checks, things like that, I can't see how that would be particularly complicated. So I don't have any direct law enforcement background other than being a firearms trainer, certified firearms trainer for police departments in the past. Not relevant here. So.
Okay, all right. So Lynn, do we have any more questions, or are we at the end of the questions?
We have no more questions.
Okay, so Chris, it's your turn to make your closing statement.
My name is Chris Luchini. I'm running for sheriff. Please vote for me. I think this is a office that does have some limited duties. It is important to elect someone to it, but keep in mind the limitations of this office and vote accordingly. Thank you.
And Jason, your closing statement.
Thank you, Beth. So I'm passionate about our community and the safety of our citizens. Again, most importantly, our kids. I've been dedicated to this community for 16 years as a volunteer and as a police officer in many capacities. And I want to continue to serve our community, which I think is important. For the one duty that the sheriff has is maintain the sex offender registry. And I think law enforcement experience is important. You have to be able to understand these house checks where you're looking for. Even an admin sheriff has capability of software to download information from individual computers that match or that are required by law to handle, and be able to know what to see, what to look for, and how to pass things on to make things are done in a legal and a professional way. It is important, and having that background, I believe, would help me in this role. So thank you guys, the league, and everybody else for joining tonight.
Okay, thanks both of you for attending and participating this evening. Thanks very much. We're going to move now to the county assessor. We have George Chandler is here this evening, and then Laura Burrows, who will have a statement read. So George, we're going to start out with you making your opening statement.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. And thanks to the league for organizing this forum. This event is the highlight of every election in Los Alamos. I'm George Chandler. I'm running for office of county assessor. The assessor values almost all taxable property in the county for the purpose of imposing property taxes. I came here to work as a physicist. I worked at the lab for 27 years. Not long after I got here, I discovered politics and the county council, and I got hooked on politics. In parallel with my lab career, I held elected offices for 16 years, a county council, assessor, and municipal judge. I learned about governance and the law and the role of the elected citizen in government. After I retired, I wanted to know more, so I went to law school and practiced law. Among other things, I represented a business and individuals in county legal proceedings, and with my wife successfully sued the county to stop an illegal election. I remain involved in politics through the party and some advocacy and reform efforts at the state level. One way to think about the role of the elected citizen in government is it's to gum up the works. An image I love is a lone protester in Tiananmen Square blocking a long line of tanks. That doesn't always work with tanks, but unlike the drivers of those tanks, the professionals who run the government have to answer to elected, non-professional, non-expert citizens, always asking dumb questions. That's who I am. And my education and experience makes me pretty good at it. I respect their education, their expertise, and their intentions, but I challenge their premises, their assumptions, and their biases. So when I learned that the assessor's job would be open next year, I decided to run again because I bring the skills and experience to ask the right dumb questions. The elected assessor is the part-time boss of an office of 6 professionals with various levels of appraiser expertise. The assessor, guided by state law, sets the standards for the programs of the office. The assessor must become familiar with all the operations of the office and is held to account for failures. The assessor must ensure that all personnel are appropriately trained, adequately compensated, and importantly, the assessor must plan ahead for inevitable personnel changes and contingencies, because the assessment cycle is rigid and unrelenting. Thank you for your attention. My name is George Chandler, and I ask for your vote for Los Alamos County Assessor.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to turn to Barbara Califf, who will read a statement from Laura Burrows.
So Laura Burrows wrote, "The announced large-scale hiring by Lannel means that there's a high likelihood of significant new constructions of both housing and commercial properties in Los Alamos County over the next 4 years. Whatever valuation is assessed on this likely boom in construction renovation, it will set the baseline for tax revenues for Los Alamos County for decades to come. It is vital that the residents of Los Alamos County and the business community have the highest level of confidence in the impartial and accurate nature of the decisions that come out of the assessor's office. I have no connection to realtors, developers, or construction business interests, nor does any member of my extended family. While this assessor's job duties are administrative in nature, I feel it is very important that the residents of Los Alamos County have the highest level of confidence that influence and favors have no part in the operation of the assessor's office. I ask that you vote for me, Laura Burrows, for Los Alamos County Assessor on November 8th.
Okay, thank you, Barbara, for reading that statement for us. So our first question goes to George.
Okay. What made you decide to run for this office? Although I think you answered that. Go ahead.
Well, I did, but I get a minute and a half to ramble, right?
Exactly.
I like being in elected office. I have studied this for my whole time. I've lived in Los Alamos and been in elected office. And I think the presence of ordinary citizens in the county government makes county government better. And I can do the assessor job. I've done it before. It's different now than it used to was, but I can deal with that. So, thank you.
Okay, next question, please.
What changes, if any, would you make in the office?
The current assessor, Ken Milder, has won national awards and national and state awards for the excellence of the office of assessor in Los Alamos County. You have no idea how well what the prestige is of this office in the assessor world. The only changes I would make to that would be to accommodate changes in law that are always likely to happen. The legislators are always out there looking to change tax laws and changes in whatever the circumstances are. But I have no plans to make changes to the office other than accommodate what needs to be done. Thank you.
And do we have another question?
We do.
Okay.
How do you assess the fairness of property evaluations?
It's done statistically. A number of statistical measures are applied to the database. There are 9,000 properties, over 9,000 properties in the database. And the various statistical methods are used to determine, to make sure that the valuations are fair. First, that valuations are compared against actual market sales, okay? And they're also compared, evaluations are compared to make sure that there's no bias against low value properties or against high value properties, but that it's fair across the board. There are a lot of statistical measures, and I would refer you to the 2022 Assessor's report, which has a good description of all the statistical measures of fairness.
Okay, are there any other questions?
We have one last question, which I believe George has also answered, but we'll ask again here for clarification. What are your qualifications?
On paper, I have degrees in physics and law. I have experience as a administrator or a team leader at the laboratory when I worked at the lab. I've been on the county council. I've been the chair of the county council and the vice chair. I have a lot of leadership experience. I think those are the things that qualify me.
Okay, so a closing statement?
Well, I'm George Chandler, and I hope that you will vote for me for assessor. And once again, I want to thank the league for putting on these forums. You've been doing. I've lived here for 48 years, and the league was doing it before I got here, and they're still going strong. I'm proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. All right, our next candidate is Michael Redondo, who is our current probate judge and is running for his second term as probate judge. And we'll go ahead and have you start with your opening statement, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Ellen, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for providing me this opportunity. My name is Michael Redondo. I grew up here in Los Alamos and have been involved in a number of different ways in helping to support my community. In the May of 2019, I was appointed to the position of probate judge to fill a vacancy. And have served as probate judge for the last a little over 3 years. I am pleased to be able to do that, and I hope to be able to continue doing that. One of the things, in addition to serving as probate judge, judges in the state of New Mexico are permitted to perform weddings. They are not required to do so. I have committed to provide that service for anyone who comes. I also speak Spanish and have been performing weddings in Spanish as well for those who want that service. So I just wanted to point out that while it's not required of judges, that's one thing that I think is very important, that we have judges who are providing that service as well. Again, I'm running unopposed to maintain my seat. So thank you.
Okay, and I think we do have some questions for you. So
All right,
we start
I welcome them.
questions. Okay.
Okay, a probate judge is not required to be a licensed attorney. Are there any drawbacks to this?
So I am not a licensed attorney. I have a master's degree in community and regional planning. I did take a few law classes in land use law. So I have some understanding of that. It does not quite apply to a state law. But the thing about the probate position is that it's not really the legal part. While it is important to learn and understand the legal issues with the state law is a very narrow part of the law in general. And I think it's, the position is one where you are more of a gatekeeper rather than a decision maker. The most important thing that the probate judge does is figure out whether or not a decision needs to be made. And if it does, transfer the case to district court. I do not think it's necessarily a drawback, especially in some of our smaller counties where, for example, Harding County has less than 1,000 residents. It might be difficult to find a licensed attorney to take the position. And so, especially in rural counties, it would be, I think, a drawback to require that the probate judge be a licensed attorney.
Do we have any more questions?
Yes. What training did you receive for this office?
So the New Mexico Judicial Education Department, they're a portion of UNM's law school that is funded by the state to provide education to judges. I attend all of their trainings that they offer for the probate judges. They do a very extensive training, usually in February, as well as some other trainings as well. But they do a very extensive training that I think it covers most of what the probate judge needs to know.
Okay, any other questions?
One more question.
Okay.
Have you made any changes to this position?
Yes. So the previous probate judges, so the probate position is a part-time position. The pay is very little. And so previous judges have generally had office hours for about 3 hours a week on usually 1 day a week. I have changed that in that I do hours by appointment, especially during COVID. I actually do most of my consultations over the phone. When things need to be done in person, I make appointments. I try to be very flexible in when those can be made. Many people will have a loved one who lives in Los Alamos who passes away, needs to see the probate judge, and they live elsewhere and come here to Los Alamos and only here for 3 or 4 days. And so if they're not here during the day that I would have had my office hours, I try to be very open so that I can meet with them flexibly when they are available. So that is one of the things that I have changed. Probably the biggest one.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
That's it. All right.
So closing, oh, you don't need a closing
No,
statement.
all right. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Michael. All right, now our last candidate of the evening is Elizabeth Allen, and she is our, I have to say this right, Municipal Judge. And go ahead and start with your opening statement.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you to the League. So in early 2009, when I had only been a judge for a few months, I started working with my staff to see if we could transition the court to paperless. One of the initial steps taken was to attend a training by the company that managed the court software. And at the training, when I posed the question about transitioning to paperless, the presenter was quick to tell me that it was almost impossible to go paperless because judges are too used to the way things are and don't like the change. It doesn't matter if you go paperless, the presenter told me. The judge will always stop the court from achieving the goal because they will want everything printed out on paper. I finally told the presenter, well, I am the judge, so I think we can make this happen. But I tell this story to illustrate the constant pushback I felt as a new judge in making any change that was different. The pandemic challenged many judges, and several courts had to shut down. However, the municipal court never had to close its doors. We were already a step ahead by being paperless. Move all court online? Okay, let's do it. We signed up for Zoom before everyone else was using Zoom. Start doing check-ins for probation and pretrial release online. Let's try it. We heard for months to even years after the pandemic that courts and probation departments throughout the state still hadn't figured out online court or online probation checks. Entire departments had shut down and were waiting. First 2 weeks, then 2 months. But with each challenge, we figured it out, we adapted, and we were flexible. Our goal? To maintain access to justice, online interpretation services, online treatment options, online community service. We could always find a way to make it work. We don't want a criminal justice system that is just reactive. We want the judges to meet people where they are, to use technology and evidence-based practices to serve those in our community. For example, we see an increase in risk-taking behavior in teen court for middle school youth, and start collaborating with organizations throughout Los Alamos and create activities called Hawk Hangout. Kids requested tools to help them stop vaping. Let's work with family council to provide smart recovery for teens. I train and mentor other judges throughout the state and work on committees with the New Mexico Supreme Court. These keep me up to date with the constant change in law and rules. I attend trainings about ensuring our probation and pretrial service programs are in line with the latest research. I continue to adapt and pivot, and to make sure our teen court and our probation department are also adapting. I attended a national training last month about bail reform, and one of the presenters from New Mexico stated that in order to change bail reform in New Mexico, they have had to wait for some of the judges to retire rather than having them change. That shouldn't be the case. Whether it is paperless, bail reform, or any prevention service, I never want to be the one that is stopping progress. I hope I can count on your vote this coming election. Thank you for your time.
Okay, let's start in on to the questions.
Okay. What further changes would you like to make to the office of municipal judge?
I think there are a lot of changes that the state is anticipating through legislature to make it so that it is easier for people to access justice. So whether it's, it's difficult to come to court, let's continue things online and make sure that we have an online system that we can continue to use post-pandemic, sort of taking some of the lessons that we've learned and making sure we have those options. I would love to see more treatment options and some different sentencing things that we would be able to utilize. But I really feel like just being open and flexible, listening to the community, I will be able to adapt and make those changes as they come up.
And do we have more questions?
Unfortunately, we do not.
Well, thank you guys. This is easy.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank all the candidates that participated this evening. This particular forum will be posted on YouTube, and the link will be sent out to all the candidates as well as to the local press media. And also a link will be on our website at the lwvlosalamos.org for review. And I think pretty much all of our audio and pictures were in good shape. So it should be easy to access that and take a look at that, to go back and look. And if you know people who wanted to attend and had conflicts, please let them know that they can still listen to our forums that we've had for this upcoming election. And so with that, I'd also like to thank all of the participants that volunteered this evening as well. And behind the scenes, including Barbara Califf, who has moved mountains to have these forums available to the public in the world that we know as Zoom these days. So thank you very much and good night.